Today's lesson is on independent and dependent variables. So, with each function, one variable depends on the other. So we're going to look at functions in real-life applications and then decide which variable depends on the other. Here we have a graph that shows how much money you get paid depending on how many hours you work. So you get to decide how many hours you work, and then the money that you get paid depends on how many hours. So in this case, hours would be independent, and then the money that you receive depends on how many hours you work. So the money is the dependent variable, hours the independent variable. The independent variable is the variable in a function that has a value that is subject to choice. And then the independent variable corresponds to x values, which also corresponds to the domain. And now the dependent variable is the variable in a function with a value that depends on the value of the independent variable. So the dependent variable changes depending on the independent variable, and this corresponds to the y values and corresponds to the range of the function. For the next few given examples, we have to decide what are the two variables, which one is the dependent variable and which one is the independent variable, and then describe a reasonable domain and range that matches the two variables. So for the first one, it says that John earns $10 per hour mowing lawns, and he works 15 hours a week. And in this example, money earned, the amount of money that he makes, depends on how many hours he works. This means that the money he earns is the dependent variable, and then the hours worked is the independent variable. He gets to choose how many hours he works, and then the amount of money he makes depends on how many hours he works. So now let's think about the domain and the range. Let's first look at hours worked, the independent variable, and just a reminder that represents the x values in the domain. So hours worked, it says 15 hours a week. So I want you to think about that, up to 15 hours a week. John never works more than 15 hours. But let's say he is sick this week, so he doesn't work any hours. It is possible that he would not work any hours in the week, but he works up to 15 hours. So anywhere between 0 and 15 would represent the domain, possible values for hours worked. And now for the range, let's think about how much money he makes depending on how many hours he works. If he works 0 hours, how much money does he make? Well, 0 hours would mean $0. But if he works the maximum 15 hours and makes $10 per hour, he would make a maximum of $150 in the week. So the range would be anywhere from 0 to $150. In our second example, it says that Destiny's car can travel about 25 miles on 1 gallon of gas. The gas tank holds as much as 14 gallons. So, which variable depends on the other variable? The amount of miles that Destiny can drive depends on how many gallons of gas she puts in her car. So the miles driven is the dependent variable, and then the gallons of gas is the independent variable, because you can decide how many gallons of gas you put in your car, and then the amount of miles that you can drive depends on how many gallons of gas you put in your car. So now let's take that information and think about the domain and the range. So let's look at the domain first, gallons of gas. Her car can hold as much as 14 gallons of gas. Well, it is possible that her car has 0 gallons of gas and then has a maximum of 14 gallons of gas. So the domain is anywhere from 0 to 14. So now for the range, we want to look at how many miles can she drive depending on how many gallons of gas she has. If there are 0 gallons of gas in her car, she can go 0 miles. But if she has a full 14 gallons and her car can go 25 miles per gallon, how many miles can she drive in using 14 gallons of gas? Well, 14 times 25 is 350. So, on 14 gallons of gas, she can drive 350 miles. So the range is anywhere between 0 and 350. In our last example, Charlie downloads songs for 75 cents each, and he plans to spend between $10 to $20. So, which variable depends on the other one? The number of songs that Charlie can download depends on the amount of money he's willing to spend. He can choose how much money to spend, and then the number of songs that he can download depends on the money. So the number of songs is the dependent variable, and the amount of money he's going to spend is the independent variable. It says that Charlie is going to spend somewhere between $10 and $20 on songs. So money to spend is the independent variable, which means the domain matches up with money. So he's going to spend anywhere between $10 and $20. And now, how many songs can Charlie download for $10, and how many songs can he download for $20? So think about 75 cents per song and then spending $10, and then 75 cents per song spending $20. To solve for how many songs that Charlie can buy, we're going to divide. 10 divided 0.75 is 13.3 repeating, but we can't buy part of a song, so we can round that down to 13 songs. And then if we do 20 divided by 0.75, we get 26.6 repeating. But we're going to round that down as well, so down to 26. So if he's going to spend between $10 and $20, he will buy between 13 and 26 songs. So that's our lesson on independent and dependent variables, two things that are constantly changing, where one, you have choice on how it changes, and then the other one changes depending on how your choice changes. And then domain and range, possible values that match up with the two variables. Good luck with the lesson.